On today's episode of Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez, my film review is On-Gaku, Our Sound, released in 2019, followed by my segment, Allow Me to Explain. And it all starts right now. This is Jordan Ramirez, and you are listening to Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez. And now, here is my latest film review. My film review for this episode is On-Gaku, Our Sound, released in 2019, directed by Kenji Iwaisawa, starring Shintaro Sakamoto, Ren Komai, Tomoya Maeno, and Tateto Serizawa. Here is the synopsis of the film. Slackers Kenji, played by Shintaro Sakamoto, Ota, played by Tomoya Maeno, and Asakura, played by Tateto Serizawa, are delinquents at their high school, and they are slackers bored with their everyday life. So one day after Kenji was walking home from school and held the bass guitar from a random passerby who was fighting somebody off screen to rescue a woman's purse, he decided they should form a band. Because the three slackers had no experience with music, they decide to perform anyway, and thus the band is formed under the name Kobujutsu. So what do I think of this film? The one thing that I would say about this film is that it is my favorite Dadaist rock musical that I have ever watched. Some of the moments that occur on the screen are mostly through these long pauses or delayed reaction shots, and long takes that only take about 1 to 2 minutes on camera. It is an unusual slacker comedy that doesn't focus too much on the emotional or physical violence or anything that comes from rock and roll musical biopics that are cliched or a trope. Instead, it has the feel of watching a Chantal Ackerman, in which the action of the film in different sequences takes place in real time. The film's tone as I watch it does tend to feel boring to me, but as I start to watch the process from beginning to end, that is the essential part of what makes this film unique. It's deadpan humor that shows no emotion within the characters, and the voices in the film throughout the story makes it a quintessential must-watch. It does have some of the best moments that I enjoyed as I was watching this film. One of my favorite moments is as Kenji, Asakura, and Ota are going to see the other band with the same name perform in the music room. The scene becomes an experimental music video when the camera focuses entirely on its lead singer, Morita. The background starts to change, and her long hair starts to move to the right as if the wind was blowing her hair, covering her face. And the experimental moments only happen with that particular band in the movie as I was watching this film. There are moments when there is not a single musical score in the background, but it is mostly ambience. The moments that do feature a rock score occurs during the subplot involving Oba from another high school and his gang going after Kenji, even though he has not shown up to fight them. The music which I enjoyed was done by Tomohiko Banse, Grand Funk, and Wataru Sawabe. The other times that you hear the rock score are sometimes when the other band named Kobujutsu performs their songs that feel like watching an experimental music video done entirely in rotoscope. The animation in the film, I started to notice that the backgrounds and some of the character designs looked like as if it was done in watercolor art. It gives the film some life with the bright colors despite the deadpan environment in the film that occupies its humor. The film is based on the manga by Hiroyuki Ohashi. The director of the film, Kenji Iwaisawa, said in an interview that he befriended Ohashi at a part-time job and he read his manga. Iwaisawa noted that in traditional stories about high school when it comes to forming a band, he said, quote, "You tend to think about a youthful tale involving friendship, love, or struggles, which were apparently absent in the manga. So Iwaisawa made a storyboard based on this manga instead of writing a screenplay. Kenji Iwaisawa was a director who before had no experience in working in film or anime, and the manga was at the time not a hit. He knew that budget-wise that it would be tricky since the film was not made by a major studio, so the film was done entirely with no budget as an independent production, and because the film had no budget, they couldn't get professional animators, so they hired 20 non-professional animators who were found through online callouts as they were being hired for the process of the film. So for the budget, they had to crowdfund and fund the film themselves to get the project on budget and on time. For the animation portion of his first feature, Iwaisawa used rotoscoping, which is filming live action footage and animating over it. Iwaisawa said in an interview about the choice to use rotoscoping, quote, "Making it too similar to the manga style wouldn't enhance the live action material, so I only took in the manga designs as nuance to create the characters." Visually, he took inspiration from Takeshi Kitano and Aki Kaurismäki. Kaurismäki was known for his minimalist style of filmmaking and still camera movement. Kitano was known for a bleak outlook and use of deadpan humor in his films, previously a comic, now turned filmmaker. The type of shots that are seen in this film are mostly wide shots, long shots, having a protagonist who is expressionless throughout the film, all key signatures in this picture. The musical influence was mostly taken from 70s rock that were incorporated into the visuals and the songs throughout the film. Iwaisawa had a clear vision of what he wanted the songs to sound like when he instructed to the musicians, and that when they came back with the songs from his unique vision, that there would be zero fixes or changes that would match what was in his mindset. Iwaisawa said in an interview when asked to look back on the making of the film of his proudest moments, he responded, quote, "During production, many people thought that I wouldn't be able to complete this project. Not only did I finish it, but the film has also been shown outside of Japan, especially in North America, and I am proud of that. Also, I am taking away the fact that many people saw this film even though it was financed independently, and I realized that there is still a lot of potential for animation." End quote. The film had its world premiere at the Ottawa International Animation Festival on September 26, 2019. It was later released in Japan for a limited release on January 11th, 2020. It made its American debut on July 17th, 2020 as part of Japan Cuts and was licensed by G-Kids. What I will say about this film is that it is an original idiosyncratic rock musical that feels completely different from other rock musicals in the visual and tonal aesthetic with its offbeat characters and its deadpan humor. While some of the best moments involve long takes featuring delayed reactions or long pauses that may seem boring and may not move the plot forward, I think that's what makes it unique on its own terms. I love the characters, the direction, the animation, and the music that makes this film one of my absolute favorites of this year. We will be right back with Allow Me to Explain. There is an increasing concern among gun safety advocacy groups about a bill that would endorse permitless carry in the state of Florida. The legislation has support amongst the Florida GOP and the sheriffs of Florida as well as the NRA in Florida, but opposition amongst Democratic leaders and gun safety groups. And why this type of legislation is not only necessary but also dangerous for every Floridian in this state. So, it is time for Allow Me to Explain. The Florida House Subcommittee on Tuesday, known as the Constitutional Rights, Rule of Law, and Government Operations Subcommittee, met on Tuesday and, in a party-line vote, the legislature passed its first hurdle. Some of the Floridian citizens, as well as some non-profit organizations, took the time to issue about the dangers of this legislation that will increase the threat of violence in the public. Catherine Donovan, a self-described Republican, said, quote, "Responsible gun owners are fed up with pro-Second Amendment extremists who keep saying that all gun owners are against any kind of gun violence prevents legislation. I'm here today because we're taking our voices back." Another individual who talked about her concern with the legislation is Gay Valamont, a member of Mom Demands Action. And she said, quote, "By demolishing our permitting laws, other states have shown that Florida could face an increase of violent crime in gun deaths and officer-involved shootings. Permitless carry legislation is dangerous, it's reckless, and it's extreme. It is a clear example of politicians putting their political ambitions ahead of Floridians." The legislation was first introduced on January 30th of this year by House Speaker Paul Renner, along with the Florida County Sheriffs at the state capitol at a news conference. Renner said, quote, "The Constitution did not give us those rights, our Creator gave us those rights. But it does put it down on paper in the Second Amendment, and the courts have interpreted that to mean an individual right to keep and bear arms for self-defense." End quote. The legislation that was introduced would eliminate the need for concealed carry permits, meaning any resident and non-resident of Florida would carry concealed weapons out in the public without a license. but the legislation would have no effect on current requirements for purchasing an actual firearm. So far, this legislation has the endorsement of Governor DeSantis, the Florida House, the Florida Senate, as well as the NRA in the state of Florida, which is incredibly concerning. So we need to examine the history of how open carry laws have started to increase lately and what is the definition of open carry or permitless carry in this situation. According to the website giffords.org, quote, open carry refers to the practice of carrying openly visible firearms in public, end quote. In the past few decades, the open carry legislation had been introduced and made into law in 25 states so far. Most of the legislation for expanding gun ownership and loosening already existing gun prevention laws were lobbied by pro-gun or pro-Second Right amendment groups such as the NRA, for example, which had been instrumental in getting the legislations in various states passed in exchange for their donations. A study conducted by everytownresearch.org has found that 88% of Americans think that you should get a permit before carrying a concealed weapon in public, as well as over 80% of gun owners, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, all share an agreement that high safety standards are critical in issuing concealed carry permits. According to the website giffords.org, quote, researchers have suggested that the presence of visible firearms may alter behavior and increase aggressive and violent behaviors. Since it has been well known historically that gun restrictions on concealed weapons increases the likelihood of public safety, not only will this law make the threat of public safety an issue, but it also increases violent crime that can easily confuse law enforcement in this state as it happened in the other states. Take Wisconsin, for example. When the legislation was signed into law in 2011 by then Governor Scott Walker, increased violent crime started to increase. Aggravated assaults with a deadly weapon was on a 4-year decline from 2007 to 2011. From 2012 to 2019, the assaults rose to a 56% increase with 2,600 aggravated assaults per year. Another example is in the state of Arizona, in which the gun permit laws were lax and led to an increase in murder and aggravated assault. Gun injuries and deaths increased at 11%, while an individual involved in a crime that would lead to being shot increased by 24%. While it may seem that all the GOP lawmakers are in favor of this legislation, it turns out that there is only one organization who is not enthused about this bill, and that comes from the organization known as the Gun Owners of America. And the state director, Louis Velez, responded in an interview with the Florida Phoenix, quote, 47 states have open carry. This bill does not address that issue. Only Florida, New York, and Illinois have an outright ban on it. Why are they not going all the way? That's what I want. That's what Gun Owners of America wants. That's what our 2 million plus members want. And as I have mentioned before, what I cannot offer at this moment isn't a positive outcome for the situation in the state of Florida right now, because we've already seen protests against this, and we've already seen the protests from March for Our Lives that have come to the state capitol in Tallahassee, as I have seen in Anna Eskamani's Instagram account. All I will say is the only way to make yourself aware of this issue and what can be done is to educate yourself and your friends about what permitless carry is, the harms of it, and the effects that this bill and so many others that have been used in other states on the entire state of Florida, as well as in other communities, and what the damage will cause in this state. If you want to help with this issue, go to these websites or volunteer for more information about how you can support gun safety. Giffords.org, everytownresearch.org, marchforourlives.com, sandyhookpromise.org, and brandyunited.org. I cannot stress this enough, because while we Americans may be numb to everyday gun violence situations and gun deaths and everyday situations that involve shootings in churches, in town halls, in malls, in schools, and everywhere else, I think this is an important issue that not everyone may be in agreement with, but I think of it as an issue that we can all agree that it is not something that is partisan or something that is increasingly one-sided. I think of it as an issue that all Americans should pay attention to if they want to live longer or they want to educate themselves without filtering disinformation into their mindsets. This has been Allow Me to Explain. You have been listening to Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez. This series is now available to listen to at 4 p.m. on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Radio Public every Friday, as well as my mini-sodes, Jordan Ramirez Recommends, every Monday at 12 noon. Make sure to go to my blog website at Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez podcast.wordpress.com with my latest podcast episode on the page labeled Episodes. You can contact me on my social media feeds such as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I am also available on my Letterboxd profile. If there is a film that you recommend that I would put for my next review, make sure to submit it to my social media accounts, and I will also open up a page on Letterboxd entitled Must-Watch Films or Recommended Films from My Viewers. And until then, I'll see you at the movies.